Alright guys, well welcome to this leadership development session on negotiation. So the first thing I'll ask you, because I've read some studies around this, is what percentage of your day, or your conversations probably more accurately, do you think that you spend in negotiations?
Depends how you look at it, but it could be like 80%.
Well, it's dialogue,
It
isn't
affects
it?
everything I do.
It's everything you say and
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, any other ideas there from Australia?
A lot. I mean, I think a lot of the time, like even in any role, you are often negotiating in some form.
Absolutely. Well, the study was between 50 and 70% of your conversations, you're actually in negotiation. So, just give me some examples, I guess, during your day. What sort of negotiations are there? There's the obvious and there's the less obvious.
Well, the rates, negotiation, fees, etc.
Rates, fees, yep. So negotiating for someone else.
Deadlines, time frames.
Yeah, negotiating people to put my tasks ahead of other people so that I meet deadlines.
Yeah.
Getting more done for less.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many ways that we negotiate, aren't there?
Yeah.
And so much time we spend doing it. Now, let me ask you another question. How much time have any of you spent learning about the art of negotiation? There's a few salespeople here.
Yeah, quite a lot.
Yeah.
So the people in the SS team probably a fair bit. What about the others?
Not enough.
I don't
So
know.
informal or formal? Because I think you learn a lot informally just by
Yep.
in the negotiation, but then formal training, I don't think we do it very much at all.
No. Any further from Australia? You guys there?
Yep.
Yeah. Anyone? How many of you have done formal negotiation training?
I've only done what we've done with Gary and what we've done with you and what I've done in the previous recruitment role.
Yeah.
And negotiation, but
I haven't
done anything formal.
It's interesting though, isn't it? If we spend 50 to 70% of our time in negotiations, yet most of us haven't really done much training on negotiation. And actually having we learn a lot of stuff innately and we get better at it. And probably a lot of us don't have a framework on how to actually negotiate to get the right outcome. And if we're spending most of our time, the majority of our day doing it, then it's probably worthwhile, isn't it? So, as a leader, there's a lot of places you're negotiating, and you threw some ideas out there and some examples before. You're negotiating for yourself. You're negotiating to get what you want. You're negotiating for your team, going back for your team, getting what they need and what they want. I think that's really critical as a leader. And you're negotiating with your team because you want them to do things that you need them to do for the betterment of the team, for the progression of your cause. And so we're negotiating all the time with all these different people. Some you might be negotiating with someone and for someone at the same time. So it's quite a complex sort of interaction really as a leader, how much you're negotiating. And we're doing it at home too, obviously. It's not just in the office that we're negotiating. If you're married, you know that you're doing a lot of negotiating. If you've got kids, you're doing a heck of a lot of negotiating. So it's worthwhile getting good at it. So what I want to do today is share, there's two parts I see of negotiations. And where a lot of people, I think, don't focus is the pre-negotiation, and that's just as important. What are you doing before you actually enter the negotiation, and then what are you doing in the negotiation? And then there are some other factors to consider, some critical considerations, and some traps that we can fall into. That often when you're just aware of those traps, you don't, just by shining the light on them, you're less likely to fall into them. Now, where I learned negotiation, where I started to get interested in it, was from a guy called Bill Urey. Has anyone heard of Bill Urey?
Yep.
Heard of a book, Getting to Yes? He's like one of the world's foremost leaders in negotiation, and I had the privilege of getting to meet him and getting to spend time with him in Mexico with Tony Robbins a few years ago. And just to put him in perspective, I was sitting at one time having lunch with him and with Tony, and Bill was sharing with us a number of negotiations he'd been involved with. One was how he negotiated the end of the Cold War. No, sorry, not the Cold War. He shared that one. But they negotiated the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like, he was on the team that negotiated that end. Now, at this point, America and Cuba had nuclear missiles pointing at each other with fingers on the button ready to push. And so it would have been world annihilation. And they were just so far off the same side, same side of the table that they just weren't getting anywhere. And what Bill found, and this is an amazing conversation, hearing this is the guy who was doing it, he found the one thing that they had in common, and he was looking for that one, what's the one thing that they shared? And the one thing that they shared was that neither country wanted an accidental nuclear war. So it wasn't that they didn't want nuclear war, because they were both ready to push the button, and they were ready to win the nuclear war, but they didn't want it to happen by accident. And so by finding that one little crack, the one piece of common ground, he and his team were able to negotiate the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and clearly we still have a world. So this is really important. And so what I've learned from Bill is a structure of how to approach it. And I've sort of adapted a little bit as well, because I find sometimes these structures can be overly complex. His wasn't really, but this is really adapted from him. So pre-negotiation, this is the important part, which is what most people don't focus on. And so we're going to go through each of these things. But this is your preparation. This is where you get yourself to a point where you can enter the negotiation and you're ready to win. Now, you are ready to get the outcome that you need to get. So the first place, you go to the balcony. We'll go through these. The second is you have to develop your background. We'll go through what that is. And the third is that you've got to separate the people from the problem. So the first bit is go to the balcony. This is where before you go into a negotiation, and this can happen quickly if it's a little one, or it may be that you have to spend a lot of time preparing. So for big negotiations, I'll spend a lot of time preparing and going through this. This is where you get the helicopter view. This is the 30,000 foot view. So you're standing on the balcony, you're looking down, you're looking at all the players in the picture, in the negotiation, and considering each of them. You've got to start calm, and you've got to take the time to prepare. I think this is one of the things I learned from Bill, is that people just rush into the actual negotiation. Let's get in there and let's get fighting. But you've got to take that time. And one thing I've learned in my life is never enter a negotiation in anger, because you'll never get a good outcome. When you're highly emotionally charged, you've got to be calm, because then you can engage your head. As soon as you get too emotional about things, you stop thinking and just start shooting. Suspend your judgment beforehand as well. And this is something that I've really had to work on, because prior to this, I really was like, okay, I'm going to go into the negotiation and I want this outcome. Now, suspending your judgment means being open to the fact that you may not have thought yet of the best way of solving this thing. That there may be a way that, as together you might be able to figure out that there might be a win-win situation for everyone that isn't yet on the table. And you develop your plan. So you do get clear on what is the outcome you're looking to achieve. So you do have a plan and a target, but be open that there may be a better one. And as always, why is it important? Because the outcome is never really what we want. The why is what we want. And we'll go through this in the actual negotiation, because we want to understand the other person's why as well. So when you understand why it's important, you open up a whole lot more opportunities to win the negotiation. Now, when I say win, it doesn't mean the other person loses. But you want to win yourself. You've got to get a win. What's the pressure on the other person's side? So what's the leverage? What is impacting them? It's really important to think about that beforehand, because that might be key leverage that you can use in your negotiation. Who's got to say yes? So are you negotiating with the right person? With doctors, we know that sometimes the doctor may not be the person you need to negotiate with. It may be their spouse that may be making the decision, But we've got to make sure that we know we're talking to the right person. And what are the obstacles? What are the potential stumbling blocks? What could catch you? What could catch them? So this is really just a number of questions. I think questions direct our focus that you can apply, and I'll send this out afterwards, to really get yourself that broader picture, that broader view of the state of play. How is it right now? What do they want? What are their pressures? What do I want? Why is that important? Does anyone have any questions about this part? I think this is a really important part. This is the bit that probably takes a lot of the time. beforehand. But this is the bit that's really important, because when you understand the pressures and the needs of the other person, you're in a lot better position to create a win-win situation.
I like that analogy, they go to the balcony, sort of taking yourself
Yeah.
back to that place of calm and perspective almost.
Exactly. Take yourself out of the situation, because it's, when we're in the situation, it's so hard. When you're in the wood, you can't see the wood for the trees, the old saying, but you can't see out. You've got to jump out and remove yourself. The second bit is develop your BATNA, and this is the best alternative to no agreement. You've got to know in any negotiation where you walk away. Because if you don't have a point where you walk away, you're going to get screwed in the negotiation. You've got to know where you walk away, and even though this bit's really hard, you've got to be willing to walk away. You've got to get yourself to the point where you are comfortable with the BATNA, that it's real. Because it's not like I'm going to walk away at this amount, bidding on this house. We get to it and go, oh, we'll keep going. That wasn't actually your BATNA. Figure out what your BATNA is, and be prepared to walk away at that point. When I had IT partners in MedRecruit, and it wasn't working out, I needed to get their shares back off them. And so going into that negotiation, I had to work out at what point, and this is where I really learned this lesson. I had to get to a point, at what point would I walk away? And that's really hard. But I had to get to a point where there is a point where I'm not going to pay any more for their shares.
Gosh, that'd be tough.
It's really difficult, but I had to get to that, because otherwise I'd have gone in and they'd have just gone, just price going up, price going up, price going up. So we got a valuation done by Deloitte, and my BATNA was higher than the valuation. So I was prepared to pay more than it was worth at that point. But there was a point that I was like, I'm not going to pay any more than that. And the thing is, they weren't going to pay more than that either. But the fact that I got myself to a point where I'm like, all right, I'm comfortable saying, at that price, you guys can have it and you can pay me out. That takes all the wind out of their sails, because then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, they'll actually walk away from this thing. So you've got to be prepared, you've got to get yourself to that point, even if it's really difficult. But if you do, because if you don't, you're just the guy who's going to keep going up. You're going to pay more and more and more. And I think it's really, really important. Does anyone have any thoughts, comments, or questions around that?
I think a really good example of that as well is when you're at an auction for a house, is basically knowing what you're prepared to go to, because it's very easy to get emotionally tied up in a house, and saying, right, I've just got by $5,000, and then so it's only $5,000 when you're looking at a whole lot of money, and it's another $5,000, and before you know it, you're at $20,000 more than what you.
So the key is that you get emotional beforehand, and you say, where am I really going to walk away?
Yeah.
Because you could. That's the thing, is you don't go, I'm going to walk away at this amount. I might just slip it past that. This is it. This is your. There is no beyond this. That's what with the company. I had to get to a point where I'm like, at this amount, I'm not paying you that for your shares, and you're going to pay me. That was how it works. It was, if they don't buy it from me, I buy it from them. There was no way they were going to pay that amount, because it just wasn't. They were going to throw money away. But you have to get yourself to that point. This is an emotional thing. This is a shift to go, I can walk away from this thing. Really important. And then the third part in your preparation, when you're preparing for the negotiation, and this is just a little distinction that I got to keep reminding myself of, it's so important, is separate the people from the problem. So untangle, disengage, or disentangle, as I put up there, the people from the problem. Take the problem and put that aside, and put the people in another place. Because then you can be soft on the person, but hard on the problem. You can make the problem intolerable, but you don't make the people intolerable. Again, when I came back to that, buying out the shares in MedRecruit, I made the problem intolerable. This isn't working. We're blowing way too much money in an IT platform that's not working. We just keep spending money on it. And the fact that you guys are IT guys, this is our focus. We're not an IT company. We're a recruitment company. But I wasn't hard on the people. I'm like, you guys are good guys and you're doing your best. No question about it. but the problem is intolerable, and that's got to change. As soon as people feel like they're being attacked, if you're hard on the person, the fences go up. I'm not saying there's not a time to attack a person, but I'm saying if you want to get a good outcome in a negotiation, you don't want to attack the person. You attack the problem. You make the problem intolerable, and together you can agree that the problem is intolerable. They're never going to say, "Yeah, I'm an idiot. I'm a crappy person." They're never going to agree to that, but they might agree that the problem's intolerable. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, both people agreed. We don't want an accidental nuclear war. That was intolerable. That's just stupid. We can agree on that. Fantastic. We move forward. If we were focusing on Cubans, you guys are idiots, and and the Americans, we're the greatest. There's no way anyone's going to agree to that, or the opposite way around. No one's going to agree to that. So this is really important. And once you've done this, you've gone to the balcony, you've got a picture, you've worked out where you'll walk away, and you've got yourself comfortable at walking away at that point, and you've really focused on the problem, not the people, then you're prepared. Then you're ready to step into the negotiation. Then you're ready to step into the negotiation with a full arsenal and emotionally ready to win. And this might be, and I'll talk about some traps later, this is not win at their expense, but you've got to get your outcome. In a negotiation, it's important to win. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
No.
Or noticed any times that maybe in your life, in a negotiation, you've gone and you've fallen, you haven't done one of these things and it hasn't played out?
I think, Sam,
Yep.
I think myself, hold on 1 second. I think there's been lots of situations, not lots actually, a few situations where we've had that, even my time at MedRecruit, where I've got more focused on who the person was, whether it's someone in medical staffing or the doctor themselves as an individual, and gone in with the approach of, this person is causing, is the cause of all this, when actually it's not them that's going to solve it, it's us agreeing on what the outcome is.
The thing is, it doesn't matter if they're the problem, because you're trying to get to an outcome. You're trying to win this thing. You're not trying to make someone feel rubbish. You're not trying to feel like the greatest. You're trying to win the negotiation. And I think that becomes really important. You're trying to take the problem and solve the problem, not worry about the person. Really important distinction. So once you're prepared and you're ready, then you can enter the negotiation. Now the first thing in the negotiation is to focus on interests, not positions. I'll go through this. Deliver a positive no and build their golden bridge. And I'll go through what all these things are. So in terms of focusing on interests and not positions, a position is a tangible thing that somebody wants. So it might be a price, it might be an amount of money, it might be a time period, it might be, it's a tangible thing. The problem with positions is that you can get stuck on a position. You can go, this is what I want, this is what I want. Now remembering that there are means goals and there are end goals. Now positions are often the means goal. No one cares, no one actually wants $1 million. They want what $1 million will do for them. So, and if you put it in a perspective like that, what if someone wanted $1 million? What if you could give them everything $1 million would get them and more, but not give them $1 million? Then you might be able to negotiate something that everyone wins, for example. An interest, on the other hand, is a need, it's a desire, it's an aspiration, it's a concern, it's the why, it's the end goal, it's the point behind why they want this thing. And once you understand this, and I'll give you an example from my life recently, you can actually generate options for mutual gain, because you can invent options that meet both people's interests. You can brainstorm, you can come at it and go, forget about the thing, what do you really want, why do you want it? Let's figure out ways we can both have it. How can we expand the pie? How can we make this not a, you have this section, all of this section, how can we make it this 3 pies, for example? Now, an example from me recently was at home with Claire. And Florence, our daughter, is turning, she'll be 10 months on Sunday. And she still hasn't had a birth notice in the in the paper. So it's getting on. We didn't put one in initially because we didn't name her for 6 weeks. So I wanted to put a birth notice in the paper. And I was like, Claire, we've got to put this birth notice in the paper. And Claire's like, no way. That's just stupid. Like, it's 10 months afterwards, you know. Look how stupid we look if we put a birth notice in 10 months afterwards. And so her position was, we don't want a birth notice. My position was, we want a birth notice. So we're like, all right, let's use this thing. Let's use the interest thing. And I was like, okay, what are your interests? Why don't you want to put a birth notice in? And Claire said, well, because it makes us look a bit stupid. And it looks like, you know, we're kind of bad parents because we haven't put it in until 10 months later. This is just ridiculous. And I'm like, all right, cool. And so I shared my interests. And my interests were, we had one daughter who we put a birth notice in. Second children, because sometimes get less of a focus than the first one. So I was like, I don't want Zara to have a birth notice in her little scrapbook, and Flossie not to have one. And Flossie to go, why didn't I get one? You know, second child, didn't get round to it, what's the deal? So for me it was about fairness between the two children. And making sure that both children felt like we loved them equally. So alright, so we got this thing. So we got the interest is, I want the daughters to feel like we love them equally. I mean, this is probably, the daughters probably have no interest in this whatsoever. Opposition or an interest.
Not at the moment.
But anyway, what if they do in the future? So I wanted them to feel fair. I wanted to make sure that, you know, we treated them both the same. And Claire didn't, you know, thought we didn't want to look stupid. So I was like, all right, cool. You know, let's invent an option for mutual gain. How can we get both? Right, let's put a birth notice in, but let's pre-frame it with, we know this is really late. You know, make a bit of a joke of it, and then put the birth notice in. And so, you know, we look funny, I think, not stupid. And we get the birth notice in. So it's going in on Saturday. She's 10 months old on Sunday. So that was just a little example of, if you have a position, you just put no and yes are opposite sides of the coin. There's no in between. But if you work out what is it that you really want, well, how can we make that work? So, you know, I think, you know, in that situation we both win, but ultimately it's Florence who wins because she gets a birth notice. So this is really important, and I think most of the time we all jump to focusing on the position. You know, I know that that's where I go a lot of the time. But what is the interest? If you can dig deep and find out their interest, there's an option to expand the pie. There's an option for everyone to win. Any questions about that? No. Australia?
No.
Alright, cool. And I don't know how you might use this in terms of medical staffing units and with doctors, but I'm sure there's ways to, you know, we do that. I think we do, you know, we do a good job of focusing on interests. Because we look at the why, we look at what someone's looking for, lifestyle, career, financial goals, you know, we look at that. And so there are many more options when you focus on the why that someone wants someone than as opposed to, I want this job in this location where there's only one option. You know, and same thing for the hospitals too. So I think this is really powerful.
There's a lot of that with the practices because they don't want to pay the fee, but they've had a vacancy for a year.
Yeah.
So they need to get the doctor in there. So there's a lot of that, you know, looking after their patients and focusing on their interest as opposed to focusing on how much it's going to cost them.
But also the interest probably in terms of what's it actually costing. So if you can, you know, there's what's it costing them to not have that doctor in.
The greater good.
Definitely.
And what is that?
Looking at the greater good.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at beyond the fee, for example.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a really, you know, it's really a good way to take things beyond a fee.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you translate the fee into, you're a very, really busy person, you've got lots of skills and experience, you don't want to waste your time on doing recruitment, you know. Your expertise is helping people's health, our expertise is finding the right person for you, you know, so the fee is inconsequential in terms of the value that person will bring your business.
Definitely. And I mean, we've got our guide to hiring GPs, which has a lot of that.
Yeah.
You know, it's really good.
Yeah, great. So the next bit is when you get to a point where you can deliver a positive no. And what this no is a strong word. You know, too many people fall into trying to say yes all the time. If you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else inadvertently. But no is not a bad thing to say in a negotiation. And to deliver a positive no, it's a three thing. It's a three-way, you know, you call it a certain type of sandwich. But You deliver the yes to your interests. So yes, I am absolutely, we're not going to, I don't want to do something that makes us look like just bad parents. No to anything that hurts your yes. No. I feel we have to do something to make sure that Flossie gets her birth notice in. And yes, let's do this in a way that's a bit of a laugh, and we put it in the paper. So it's yes to your interest. The person is heard. This is a key bit. You've got to make sure they feel heard, and it's like, I'm going to get what I want. This is the really important thing. Their interests are what they want, so they're going to hear yes, I'm going to get what I want. No to whatever what really hurts your yes, because there are some things that you've got to say, but we're not prepared to do this. I'm not going to give you $1 million. But what I will do is this, and you're going to get everything $1 million will get you and more, and it doesn't cost me $1 million, for example. So a positive no is really important. And there's, there's strength there. Because if you're just saying yes, then you're just going to acquiesce and you're just going to roll over. And then the final bit is build their golden bridge. And I thought this was a fantastic thing that I learned from Bill. Write their victory speech. Write the way they can walk away from this thing going, I won. Because if you can give them that, because a lot of the time in a negotiation, they're thinking, how do I look coming out of this? How can I walk away going, I got it, I nailed it, I got what I wanted? It's sort of describing to them, we're bringing them back to their interests, bringing back to what was important. What did you want out of this negotiation? Man, you got that and more. Imagine, what you could tell someone. This is what you could tell someone. When I did the negotiation to buy back those shares in MedRecruit, I sort of wrote their victory speech. And by the end, the negotiation took about 45 minutes. It was really quick. They could walk away going, man, we put this into MedRecruit and we're walking away, we're getting more than the valuation that Deloitte did. And I knew the company was worth a heck of a lot more than that. But we're going to, or will be in the future. But they walk away going, we got more than it was worth. We negotiated hard, we got what we wanted, and we don't have to handle all this IT headache that's going to have to get fixed as well. Now, I got what I wanted as well, because I got the company at a price that I was prepared to pay for, and I got the payments spread over 18 months, so it wasn't like a big lump sum. So actually, to me, the impact was low. They got this higher price, but split it over 18 months, it wasn't as big an impact. So we all won. That's the thing. They walk away going, I won, and they did win. No question. I walked away going, I won, and I did win. No question. It was a win-win situation, and by building the golden bridge, they get to see that it's a win-win situation. They get to see that they've won this negotiation. Is there any questions about this? This doesn't have to be that complicated. There's a whole structure on building their victory speech, but really I think it comes back to bring them back to their interest and show them how they're going to tell people that they met their interest. Another part of this is think about what objections they might get, what someone else might say to them to go, well, you didn't get this or you didn't do this. And then handle those objections with them up front. Say, look, you may think you didn't get this, but here's the reality of the situation. So you kind of give them their objection handlings and build them the victory speech so they walk away patting themselves on the back going, on the champ. Any questions?
I think that's so really important. I can think about times where I've been dealing with, quite often you negotiate with the same person on a regular basis, and if you leave that person feeling that they were cheated or they basically didn't get what they wanted out of it or the other person won, that when you go to negotiate with that person, they're straight away defensive as to this time I'm not going to lose,
Yeah.
and even before you come into the negotiation, it's a waste of time because they're not prepared to negotiate. They've got and if I get my yes, I'm not going to back down no matter what because I lost last time. So they see it as losing and they don't want to lose another one.
They're focused on positions, not interest.
Yeah.
Richest man in China, what's the secret to being so rich? He said, I always make sure someone else gets a little more out of the deal than I do. Then everyone wants to do deals with him. He doesn't worry about the pennies and dimes. He focuses on the big picture. Some considerations when it comes to negotiations and to keep in mind. One is that they're really logical. Remember, human beings are emotional creatures. So people, you may go in with this clear head, but you're going in with emotion too. But chances are the person you're negotiating with is negotiating from an emotional perspective. A really important distinction is decide when you're negotiating and decide when you're giving. Because there's a different, you don't behave the same way. You don't go into a situation where you're actually looking to give with the same approach as you do for a negotiation. You're not always trying to get the best deal. Sometimes you're in a contribution giving mode, not a negotiating mode. When you're in that mode, very different. Give what you're comfortable of. When you're looking to negotiate, get the best deal for yourself. Give respect. If there isn't mutual respect, then a negotiation is very difficult. And the best way to get respect is to show respect to someone else. Show humility. Be polite. Respect their customers. Respect who they are. And they're going to be more likely to respect you too. And something in terms of satisfaction and outcomes are not always linked. And it depends on what you go into the negotiation focused on. So people who go in focused on the target, the outcome that they want, they get a better outcome, but they go out less satisfied. So while they get more because they were focused on what they wanted throughout the negotiation, they come out going, but I didn't get what I wanted exactly, so they're less satisfied. People who go and focus on their BATNA, they get a worse outcome, but they go out more happy because they're like, well, I wanted this outcome, but I'm actually focused on here, and I got here, so I got better than I really expected. So the key is to go and outcome focused and come out BATNA focused. So go in looking for what you target, what do you want the outcome, you're going to get the best you can, and then go out going, got that, but actually this is what I was prepared to walk away from. So I got a heck of a lot more. And then you can get the best outcome and be the most satisfied. And the other point is be prepared to challenge. Make sure that there are no sacred cows in this thing. Make sure that you're prepared to question, you're prepared to dive deep, you're prepared to question their assumptions, question your own assumptions. The more inquisitive you are, the more likely you are to get a good outcome. Something Tony said to me that I thought was really important is, in a negotiation, the most flexible will win. If you can be flexible, if you can be not rigid, focused on your position, if you can focus on your interests, and you can look at different ways and come at it from whatever way, then you're likely to win. You're more likely to win than the person who's rigid and focused on the one thing. And the traps to watch out for. And these are the most common ones, but I think these are really easy to fall into. The winner's curse. The winner's curse is win at all costs. It's, I want to win, I want to get the house, I want to do whatever it is, but I'm not actually going to focus on really kind of the deal. And you'll end up either settling for too little or paying too much or whatever it is. But you go for the win at the expense of getting what you want. That's exactly related to rushing. One thing that Bill said was, the most patient person is likely to win the negotiation. The person who's most chomping at the bit to get an outcome will fall for the winner's curse. They'll try and get an outcome, and they got an outcome, but they weren't prepared to wait. And then the patient person, they end up getting the outcome. That's something I really had to work on myself, because I'm impatient, I want it now. But you've got to sometimes just pump the brakes and go, all right, I'll let them stew for a while. Don't be the one who's stewing and go, oh, okay, what happens if, and get yourself into a little frenzy. Agreement bias. This is the trap of people, wanting to be nice to someone else, wanting to make someone else feel better. None of us want to make someone feel belittled, or less than. So we can fall into a trap of just agreeing, and you get into a trap of you agree and you agree and you agree, and you end up somewhere you don't want to be. So this is where you've got to be prepared to say no. No is a powerful word. Escalation of commitment is really related to the agreement bias. You sort of agree to something, and then you agree to something else, you agree to something else. But with escalation of commitment, what that is really about is I've invested this much time, or I've invested this much money. I've got to get a return on that, so I can't walk away. So I'm going to pump in more money, and I'm going to pump in more money, and I'm going to pump in more money. Our old CRM system was escalation of commitment. Over the years, you don't want to know how much money was spent on that thing. But we'd spent the money, so we've got to fix it. So we might as well keep going. Blah, blah, blah. It's just, like this. And then you end up with this point with a mess, and it's like, all right, forget committing more. Let's throw it out, invest a chunk of money, get something good. So that's a really important one. Hubris. This is the arrogance, or this is the, the expecting too much, going and just backing yourself way too much, way too cocky. And then because you've got this escalated, this maniacal view of yourself and what you're worth and what you deserve, you walk away from something that could be a really good offer. But you're like, oh, I'm worth $1 million a year, not $500,000 a year, when actually you're worth $250. If you get caught up in that trap, then you're likely to just never get an outcome, because no one's going to come to you. No one's going to come up to your level. So you're just going to lose, and lose. The falling into the trap where for me to win, someone else must lose. Remember the richest man in China. I wanted someone else to walk away better off than get a better deal than I got. Look at making sure someone else wins and you win. If you're focused on win-lose, then you're more likely to end up in a lose-lose situation where you never get a deal. And getting too emotional about it as well. Getting caught up and doing something silly because you're so emotionally charged. And this is where there's so much value at the start with to go to the balcony, be calm, prepare. Because if you can get yourself to that point, then you're still going to be emotional, except that that's going to be the reality. But you're going to be much less emotional, and you're going to be much less likely to do something stupid.
What about when you prepare for a negotiation?
Yep.
Right, I've got, taking the balcony view and all the rest, and you go to this negotiation, and maybe you didn't prepare well enough, but you both walk away, stubborn as, and both having to agree to disagree. What went wrong in that situation where you find yourself walking away, going, well, that didn't get me any further ahead, they didn't get any further ahead, we're just where we were to start with. Because that's happened to me before, and it's, you put out, you do all the preparation, yet this person, regardless, is just not willing to budge. And you're not willing to budge, you're not willing to do anything either, because it's...
So there's a million things that could have gone wrong.
Yeah.
You can't answer that to go, what went wrong in this hypothetical negotiation. I mean, maybe there's a focus on positions, not interest. Maybe you weren't flexible enough. Maybe you were focused on win-lose. There's so many things. Maybe you fell into one of these traps. Maybe you you didn't take into account the fact that they're emotional. There's so many things that could go wrong. Now, you don't always win a negotiation. Some people are much more effective at it than others. And I think that if I would say that if you go out of a negotiation that you didn't get a win outcome, then there's probably something you could have done else, or someone else might have done, or another way you could have focused. So, because that way you can learn. I think if, too often people come out and go, well, they were just stubborn. I was never going to get anywhere with them, as opposed to I wasn't skillful and flexible enough to make them actually, to find that we don't want an accidental nuclear war. You want stubborn, you get America and Cuba. You find that crack, you find that common interest that you can then both move forward from. So I think this is why it's a real skill, and I think it's too easy to go, they're just stubborn, it didn't work. How could it work? What else could you have done? And really apply it, and know that it's not going to win every time. But you can get better and better at it, and you can start stacking your odds. Does that help?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no answer. There wasn't an answer to say, here's what you need to do if the negotiation didn't work, because I think there's a lot to it. And this is what I think is quite. This is the important stuff, but there's so much more to negotiation. Bill's written I don't know how many books on it, and so there's a lot of things you can learn and focus on to actually get to yes. His book Getting to Yes is about ultimately getting to that place where you both agree. Any other questions or comments? Australia.
Sam.
Yep.
All right. Let's go again. But one thing I'd say is really around knowing the person you're negotiating with and what their sort of compelling reason to be negotiating with you is as well. And like Anna talked about there, in terms of some of the things we've done in sales training and things like that can be incorporated as part of negotiation, in terms of even simple things like mirroring communication, I think, are crucial, and finding what their pain is and their real reason is for negotiating with you.
Yeah.
And also, one thing I've been caught out on in the past, and it sounds silly, but is negotiating with the wrong person who's not actually the person who makes the decision in the overall thing.
Waste of time.
Finding out from the beginning, am I actually negotiating with the right person here, or is this a waste of my time?
Absolutely, and but some of those parts of the balcony part, working out beforehand, who has to say yes, figuring out what the pressures are, what they want to do, but then getting inquisitive and asking them. And that really comes down to the interest. At this point, you've really got to get inquisitive. You've really got to find out what's important. You've really got to delve in and be as flexible as you can and find out and ask questions and figure out what it is they want. It's a great point, Henry, because if you don't do that, then chances are you're not going to have everything you need in your arsenal to create this win-win expansion of the pie.
Yeah, I think that point about who has to say yes is really critical, particularly in the commercial world, because in the commercial world I see a lot of organisations will not let you get too close to the person who actually says yes. So the decision makers, so they, particularly in recruitment, they'll keep you away from that wherever possible. And so I always ask, rather than say who has to say yes, I always ask the question of, so who else needs to be involved in this decision, and kind of figure out where the stakeholders are, because that way you don't have to disclose your negotiating point until you're actually talking to the person who actually has the decision.
Yeah, I've seen some brilliant negotiating go down. I've seen some really bad negotiating go down. And when it's been really bad, it's been when somebody has gone into it knowing what they want and just gone in all guns blazing. And then the best negotiating has been when it has been from somebody who has just sat back, listened to what this person has had to say, listened to them get quite heated, has asked some questions along the way, just taken it all in, and then empathised with them, understood their situation, and then before you know it, they're pleased to be providing the outcome that we want. It's just amazing to watch a brilliant negotiator and see the way that they manage to turn this person completely around so that they're the ones that are offering to do the thing that you want them to do. You haven't even had to ask that of them. And it's generally people that sit back and listen and ask questions rather than just go in all guns blazing like, boom, I'm going to get this deal.
And don't get too emotional.
Yeah.
Think they're calm,
Yeah.
prepared.
And even, like physically, they're even a lot quieter the way they speak a lot more slowly. It's really interesting.
One thing I have to bear in mind when I'm involved in an argument, perhaps at home, is it's a phrase I learnt a while ago. It's every argument, there's always a winner and a loser, whereas every dialogue, there's always two winners. And that's quite poignant, I think, when you're looking at going into a negotiation. There has to be dialogue. There has to be open dialogue and lack of confrontation.
Yeah, absolutely. Relationships are a great learning ground for this type of stuff. In a negotiation, I learned, in relationship, is do I want to be right or do I want to make it right? And being right doesn't necessarily mean you make it right. Most of the time, that means you make it wrong or you make them wrong. And that's the same thing in a negotiation. Do I want to get the right outcome? Do I want to get a good outcome, or do I want to be right? And there's one is an ego thing, one is a let's get what we need thing.
I watched a bit of the Bill Urey stuff, and there's an aspect to his theory where he talks about the third what's it called? The third side. So you've got two sides of the story, but there's always a third side, which is the completely impartial side. So it's a little bit like looking at the bigger picture. What's important, that third element of the process that we're the subject that we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
A bit like,
there's what I want, there's what you want, and then there's the right outcome.
And what's actually right in the whole process,
Is that sort of, I was going to ask that, whether Bill sort of covers the whole, some people come into negotiation, do the good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
That's one of the techniques he shares.
Yeah, so you've got one person that'll create a really emotional state in the other team or whatever else, and then you have the good cop that will come in and they instantly has got that sort of rapport with the other team because they they sort of feel that this person understands them or whatever else, and it's just a ploy or a negotiation ploy
Yep.
to create that emotive state within the person.
There's
Yeah.
quite a lot of dated techniques, isn't there, in negotiation? There's all sorts like brinkmanship and the nibble and all sorts of different kind of.
There's so
terms
many
that
tools
describe-
that you can use,
Mm.
including getting really, really angry. That is one of them. He's like, last thing, doesn't work, blow your top.
Or start crying.
Or crying is not crying's another one.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Some of us
Use
struggle.
that
with
home.
What was that?
So just a tip, you know how I
Getting
handle
angry
crying?
one
I go and get the tissues and I give them the tissues and
Yeah.
say, well, when you've composed yourself, we'll
Yeah.
carry on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What I do is say, why don't you go and compose yourself and come back?
yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get hooked, but be compassionate. So, any other comments or questions there from Australia? Because the Kiwis are doing a bit of talking there.
No, nothing. I don't think so. You guys? No.
All right. So, in summary, I mean, what I want us to do is keep it simple, so there's a framework to use. I think complicated frameworks never get used. So, there's 6 steps. There's before and after. So before, go to the balcony. Remember, get that helicopter view. Be calm. Go into this with a clear head. Develop your BATNA. Remember, be prepared. What the best alternative to no agreement? If you cannot reach an agreement, know where that point is and be prepared. Get yourself emotionally willing to walk away. Whatever you have to do to get yourself to that point. There's no point preparing your BATNA and not actually getting emotionally comfortable with it, because you'll just blow straight past it. So that's really, really important. Separate the people from the problem. Be hard on the problem and soft on the people. But if you do that, it's like marketing. As soon as you start selling your product or your service or whatever, people close up. As long as you're educating, people are open, they're willing, they want to learn. So as long as you're focusing on the problem and taking the person out of it, people will jump in there as well. But if you start focusing on them, it's all over. Negotiation. When you actually get to the negotiation, focus on interests, not positions. So remember that a position is something tangible, and interest is the why. The why behind it, the means, the end goal rather than the means goal. Deliver your positive no. Yes to your interests. No to whatever doesn't allow you to have a win, and yes to a constructive proposal. And build their golden bridge. Give them their victory speech so they can walk away with their heads held high, fist pump, going, I won. Because then you can all win. So the assignment this month is actually really simple. I was trying to think of something specific, but really it's just going to be, use it. Use it internally. Use it externally. And then report back on your outcomes. Really interested to hear, what did you do differently compared to what you've done in the past, and how did that actually help you? So, how do you think that changed maybe an outcome or changed the situation? Because I think with negotiation, the fact of the matter is we're doing it at least half of our time. So you've got a lot of opportunity to practice. So maybe just put the points, bless you, maybe put the points on your desk and just thought, have I prepared? Have I gone to the balcony? Have I seen their side? Do I know where I'm going to walk away? Am I focusing on the problem and taking the people out of this? When you're in the negotiation, am I focusing on the interests, or am I falling back into the trap of focusing on positions? When you get to a point, am I prepared to deliver my positive no and build their victory speech? So really work on this stuff. You've got so much scope for practice that this one is really, it's a fantastic one, and it's worth mastering. Because we can all fall into the traps, we can all do that, but the more effective we are at negotiations, the more effective we're going to be professionally, the more effective we're going to be personally, and I would also say that the more we're actually going to be liked, because we're going to be able to create these situations where people walk away with their heads out, feeling good, feeling like they won because they had their interests met. You can become a person who really serves other people and serves yourself and your team, because you can create situations where everyone walks away happy with the outcome. And I like this quote, we'll finish with a quote from Bill Urey: don't acquiesce. In fact, no may be the most powerful word in the language, the most needed word in these times of endless email and overwhelm. So remember, when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Make sure you're not saying no to what's important because you're saying yes to the unimportant. Say yes to the important stuff. Say yes to the high value things. Say yes to what's going to move you and your team towards what you want, and say no to what isn't. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Australia. Have a, if you've got any questions, or before we go, any final questions, thoughts, comments?
No.
No? Cool. All right, we'll go forth and negotiate some excellent outcomes.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, team.
Thank you.